Welcome to Sportslandia as we deal with our tax problems today. I'm Brian Slyke, joined by Ray Bradley. It's the Sportslandia podcast brought to you by the Next Professional Athlete platform. We
There
got
it
our
is.
sweatshirt in finally. Ray, yours is actually on the chair over here.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to give you your sweatshirt last weekend when you were working at UP, but I forgot. I
There you
forgot.
go.
I was in a rush.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Packed show today. We're going to be talking about the NBA playoff picture that has officially been set. We're going to recap the NCAA championship tournament, both men's and women's. There was an opening for Kentucky. Nobody wanted the job. And then we've got Nerd Corner coming up as well. We'll let you know what that is once we get to that point. But the NBA playoff landscape has been set.
Finally.
And we get play-in tournament games. Let's do it.
Yeah. A little taster before we get to the big stuff. We got some good ones, too. There's only really one dud playing game, I will say, which is Bulls-Hawks.
Oh, funny, because I was going to say, I agree with that one. That one sucks.
And then at the end of that sentence, I remembered that was your team.
I would say that as an NBA aficionado, I don't really have an NBA team. I just like watching ball.
Okay, it's like
the Bulls suck. They're awful. I don't think I've watched real Bulls basketball since the pre-Derrick Rose injury. Actually, it might have been the playoff series when Chicago took a 1-0 lead on LeBron James and the Heat. I think that was the last legit time I sat down and consumed Bulls basketball willingly.
Interesting. I figured you'd say when Last Dance came out, but that may not exactly count.
Well, that's old tape. That's not live. I'm not watching a live game.
There's a big asterisk there, so I get it. Yeah, and this one, you might, maybe you'll skip this game too. I don't know. We'll see. I think you guys have a fair shot against the Hawks. But yeah, on the East side, it's 9-10 Bulls-Hawks. And then the actual fun one, I feel like, Sixers-Heat 7-8.
Yeah, that one seems much more fun. The only issue is
revenge game, Jimmy's old team.
How is Embiid doing? I know he left with a little tweak to the knee the other day. He did come back, but
he's exactly how he is every point of the season like this. Right? He's barely held together by tape, and I don't know if he's going to be able to. Luckily, this is just a game, so like he can go out there and go balls to the walls and try to win this game. Once it gets into the regular, series of playoffs, day in, day off, one on, one off, I feel like it's difficult for him to keep that pace and that level. He's a big guy. He's dealt with injuries in the past, but this is just a one-off. But yeah, there's a lot of storylines here, obviously, with Jimmy Butler coming back, going against the Sixers. I mean, the bubble or their door only continues to get, kind of shorter as far as when they're going to make this championship run, if they are. As Embiid's getting closer and older and older, dealing with more injuries. So I don't know. And me, selfishly, I would love to just see the Heat be out. Because that's just a little.
Yeah, that's the team that probably scares you the most.
There's ironically, yes, in this whole East, even though I feel better than I did last year, because our team is different, their team is different. My team being the Celtics, just still don't want to deal with that. They just always seem to find a way to go to an even higher level in the playoffs, regardless of kind of what they're dealing with. And they have Scary Terry now.
Spoelstra Jimmy effect. Those two, for some reason,
They have the best coach in the East.
You're right. They turn it on. Another switch once they get to the playoffs. Whether it's because Spoelstra can really get into his X's and O's against a particular player, and it's not the regular season having two back-to-backs and everything else like that. But also, Jimmy he is a different player when it comes to playoffs. He sort of just like takes over. Yeah, Jimmy Butler, exactly. He takes over. But he's efficient. He's entertaining to watch, too. Like, I used to... I don't want to say I despise the Heat. Obviously, LeBron was on the Heat.
I despise the Heat.
Yeah, okay, thanks. But, to see kind of this new wave of Heat teams kind of have success where it's not the big three, I think it's better for basketball in a sense of not having the three major superstars on one team. But this is a team that has made it to 2 finals, by the way, in the last 4 years.
I'm aware.
What?
I'm aware of the finals they've made, and it's. But
my point is,
it's hard to deny them.
What was that?
It's hard to deny that they can even do it again because both of those times they were not even in the top 3 of favorites, and it didn't seem like they would get there. So I don't know.
And I'm looking at like the rest of the East right now. Like the Cavs aren't a real threat.
The Cavs are
threat.
the Cavs are a mess. The Magic can play defense. They don't have enough offense.
The Bucks are a mess too.
Giannis is hurt again.
They can't do anything. Giannis is hurt. The
Pacers are too young.
Like, yeah, and then the Knicks. You look at the Knicks, but it's a Thibodeau-led Knicks team, and they always get burnt out once they get to the playoffs.
They do.
What?
They do. You're right. And yeah, the minutes load and everything and how far they have to go. They scare me a little bit. Just with the OG Anunoby addition, the way Jalen Brunson's been playing, I think they have a similar problem to the Magic in that they need a little bit more scoring, it feels like at times. Although
they heavy Brunson lately.
They whooped the Celtics like this last week. So like that is still in the back of my head, but how much, what level of the Celtics playing at these last 2 weeks when they have nothing to play for?
Yeah, they were kind of hard.
It's kind of hard to gauge.
Clinched up for that spot.
But their defensive ability is a little scary to me. And then, there's the Celtics. But it does feel like it's theirs to lose at this point. The Heat scare me a little bit as for the Celtics and the Knicks. Outside of that, I'm not. I think the Cavs are gonna. They've been so weird this whole year with injuries and now a lot of smoke with Donovan Mitchell maybe not being there after this year. That usually doesn't bode well for a long playoffs run when you're already you're not even there yet and you're already thinking about breaking up the band. So, and the Magic can play defense like crazy. Like Jonathan Isaac and Jalen Suggs and all these guys, they're going to be able to cover Mitchell and Garland. And then it's like, okay, Evan Mobley, can you get to 30 points? Like, it's time to prove that draft stock here a little bit. I don't know if he can. But yeah, it feels a lot more understandable on the East side. There's one big threat. There's maybe one or two that can get to them. There's a couple big teams with Joel and Giannis where it's like injuries might just cancel them out. The West is all over. I have no idea what's going to happen over there other than maybe Jokic.
Yeah, so I feel like the Warriors have sort of hit a different mode right now as of late because they've been trying to push to get into the playoffs. They got that 10 spot to get to the play-in.
They have playing the Kings from last year, a little bit of a rematch.
Right. Like, I think that'll be a fun matchup. That'll be kind of like the one-and-done thing. I think the Lakers will beat the Pelicans.
100%.
So I have Lakers and Warriors doing that, moving on or whatever. But, I like the Thunder, but I think they are such a young team. What maybe inexperience is sort of like,
and the size.
We don't know how to like not be here. That we've just been playing our game. Yeah. And I think the naivete maybe of the team or just being so young might help them in the sense of, hey, this is kind of house money this year in a sense. We finally got Chet for a full year. Kind of get to see what he can do. I don't think
2 games.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody expected them to be the number one seed after what Denver did last year, them returning most of their players. You'd think that the Nuggets were going to just, turn the tables on the West, and they're stuck at number 2 because of how the Thunder played.
And they could have closed out Denver. They had an opportunity. They beat Minnesota. They had to win out, but they had to play Wemby. And they were up 20 against him, and he just took the game over. Devontae Graham made a cameo, and they ended up losing that game. And it puts them at the 2 now. I don't know if that'll end up hurting or helping them in the long run, but
I don't think it's going to matter too much because I think we all knew that Denver was probably the best team in the West again this year.
Sure. Yeah.
And once you get into a series, again, the NBA playoffs are so much different than the regular season because of the scheduling and the days in between, and you can actually plan for the opponent that you're going up against.
Level of intensity as well.
Exactly.
People actually play defense.
As much as I love the youth from the Thunder, I think this plays heavily in the favor of Denver. They've gone through the grind of it last year in the deep playoff run, obviously winning the NBA title.
Yeah.
You return the MVP, 2-time MVP, whatever. Probably should be 3-time MVP.
Might be 3 after this year. Might be.
Yeah. So, they are the best team, and I think.
I agree.
I think they're not the number 1 seed, but they're in a very good spot because they'll have home advantage in every aspect unless they play the Thunder. In which case, I still think that as much as the fans in Oklahoma City get rowdy in that stadium, I still think that Denver takes care of business against them.
I would agree. The thing outside of the youth for OKC is, and this is the obvious thing that they didn't add at the deadline, is their size. They just have no size or rebounding ability. You want to talk about if they were to match up with Denver and have to match up against Jokic specifically. I mean, it's Chet is like, I guess, your best matchup, but he's a string bean against
I was going to say, he
Jokic.
reminds me of Flat Stanley next to Jokic.
Yeah. And he probably will be flat. Yeah, he'll be like Mr. Bill or something, getting knocked over a little piece of clay. Like, that matchup specifically is tough. We'll see if it ends up getting to that level. I agree. I think this worked out very well for the Lakers, annoyingly. Like, they get to play the Pelicans, who are very hit or miss, like, and are trying to rework Brandon Ingram into stuff, and maybe that messes with their chemistry a little bit. And then one matchup we've known for ages is the Clippers Mavericks and 4-5, which I feel like they've played each other like maybe like the 3 of the last 4 first rounds, like something like that. I mean, that
is a good matchup, though. I mean, Clippers are healthy, the Mavericks are healthy. Like Luka going up against Kawhi and Paul George, and
yeah, these are both conference finals.
This one should definitely draw eyes. Like
whoever loses this is going to be like so pissed off because both of these teams easily can make the Western Conference Final and have finals aspirations. So to be out in the first round for one of these, whether it's Luka, who's probably going to be like runner-up for MVP this year, or the Clippers, who have like this 2014 All-Star team that has been playing well this year.
Luka hasn't made it out of the first round, has he?
He has. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he beat one of these Clippers teams recently, like kind of by himself.
Oh, you're right. It went like 7 games. You're right.
Yes. So he's liable to do that. And Kyrie has been like normal basketball player Kyrie for a long time, which is like
not
all you could ask. Yeah, as long as you keep him out of the press conference room and he keeps it under control. Like that insane game winner he had a couple weeks ago, where he's running left-handed, like shot near the 3-point line. It's not a lot of guys can do that. And he's on that list. And he's done this whole thing already, where he's been the running mate, where he comes in and kind of scores next to LeBron. So they're a scary team. The Clippers are a scary team. One of them is going to be out in the first round. Is kind of wild. History would say the Clippers are going to have some horrible collapse just because they're the Clippers.
Well, Doc isn't the coach right now, so
that's true. But they made sure to balance that out by adding James Harden. So he's got to work. The only guy with the worst playoff history that
this is not the same James Harden, though. I feel like that we've seen in years past. He has taken a role.
You don't need him to be that. Yeah,
and I think that has helped the team as a whole, and not letting him just control tempo and shoot 50 shots a game.
They don't need him to score 30 and make 5 threes like when he was in Houston or whatever it was. Even in Philly last year. He's
ever had in his career. Yes.
Like he can play pretty horribly, and they'll probably still be able to win a couple of those games. I don't know, worries me a little bit. But they're
finals material with Harden, but I do think that he adds more positive than negative with his role this year than he has in years past.
It's just a matter of, is he going to have the horrible playoff game that he usually does in these situations? But then how much can that even hurt them? Like you're saying, if you're on the 4th, 5th most important guy here, okay, go sit down. We'll bring somebody else in for a little bit. Maybe they can survive that. It is very possible. And then the other kind of one that we know right now is 3-6 Timberwolves Suns, which is also sort of a new school versus old school matchup. It feels like similar kind of to some of these other ones. So yeah, I'm curious where that one's going to go. The Timberwolves have been incredibly hot all year.
I mean, you're cheering for your boy Nurkic, aren't you?
I'm not doing that. I'm very glad I haven't had to watch him. Although DA has given me some stress as well this year. Although he ended playing quite well. I'm going all in on Anthony Edwards here. I love him. He's so fun to watch. He's getting some like old school Dwayne Wade 2006 vibes for me. Just like this guard who can kind of do it all. But he's so much more athleticism than Dwayne Wade. That's probably fair to say. I mean, so the dunk that he pulled off this year, which is the best dunk of the year, when he absolutely murdered whoever it was. I don't know. But, yeah, they're scary. The thing is, will the Rudy Gobert playoff thing come back? Can they just eliminate him? Towns is coming back. This is similar, I think, to, like, the Brandon Ingram thing. Like, are you worse off trying to bring this guy back into the fold than you kind of were when you were just vibing without him. I think it's probably worse with Towns just because of my personal kind of opinion of Towns and kind of some of the wacky situations he can get himself into. So that is a little worrying, but Ant's there. But then on the other side is this classic kind of old school Miami Big Three where Bradley Beal has actually played a little bit better these last couple weeks to make it look that way. But, you got Devin Booker, KD, and they've got a couple pieces. Nurkic has actually played all these games, has actually been
almost unheard of.
He's actually been good. Now, the other big thing with him is when he gets to playoffs, he'll just start fouling out of games in the third quarter. Can he survive that? Will that happen again? I don't know. But so far, the return on him is actually it's been way better than I would have thought it was.
Same. When that trade went down, I thought Portland made out pretty with that one. They got Nurkic off the books. They got a guy that was somewhat inconsistent with staying healthy and his play on the court. But I think Nurkic has sort of found a better home for himself in Phoenix with this group. And, I don't want to say that, Nurk was top 3 scorer for the Blazers, but, he's taken
it was for the Blazers.
He's the 4th, 5th guy now with Phoenix when you've got, Bradley Beal, Booker.
Yeah, they want him to do what he's actually best at, is just rebound and, be a big man who can pass, which, is a skill that he has that a lot of other guys that, for instance, the guy that they did have, DA, isn't really as adept at.
Yeah,
that's not being able to kind of, give me the ball in the post and then, kind of figure out where to go with it from there. Nurk can kind of do a little bit of a version of that from time to time. And that's more what they need when they just have all those, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker flying around screens, Kevin Durant over here, over there cutting. That makes a lot more sense for their team. So it's interesting. And they snuck into the 6. They don't have to do the play-in stuff. They're right into it now. And the Timberwolves are young, and they have exploitable players. Gobert and Towns in the past in the playoffs have been – you can game plan around them. You can figure out some ways to do stuff, and then that's just a lot on Anthony Edwards' plate. You start to think, I don't know.
We saw that a little bit last year in the playoffs, too, where he had to make a lot of plays for his team because defenses were playing cat, and it just didn't work out for him. I mean, you saw it last year. There's a perfect explanation for it and why the Timberwolves haven't been able to go far. But I think that is part of the NBA now, though. You can have a dominant big during the regular season, but if you don't have supporting pieces around them that could shoot the ball when teams start to really focus on them in the playoffs, then you're going to be in trouble. That's just it's simple. With how the game is now and how heavily teams shoot the 3, you can be as dominant as you want inside, but
if the spacing goes wrong or you're surrounding your guy with 2 guys who can't shoot, very quickly they starts being leave that. It's the Tony Allen thing. It's just leave that guy alone. Get into the paint. Now it's what are you going to do? What do you
We're going to talk about that a little bit with the NCAA championship too. When we got that, but it's. I think this Timberwolves Suns matchup is probably one of the more intriguing ones in the West right now. Obviously the play-ins have to play out and everything else like that, but I think that actually is a pretty good matchup between these two teams. Similar how Luka's probably going to be pissed off with the Clippers if the Clippers win and whatnot, vice versa. But the Suns are an exciting team. They have they have some great players. They play a fun style of offense too, especially when things get rolling with them.
Yeah.
And I still think there's some love for the Suns from a couple of years ago when they went to the finals and just couldn't close it out after being up 2-0. And there's still people out there that want to see them succeed. And God, I'd love to see them, succeed. I like Bradley Beal personally, but that's more of a second level connection through a college friend of mine who's test buds. But so secretly I've always been all right, I hope he does well. But when he was by himself in Washington, you knew that team never really stood a chance. And now he's got an opportunity with this new team where he doesn't have to be the number one option. And
just so be the Ray Allen.
Exactly. He can play a bit more freely and move around and find those open looks. I think that plays more for Phoenix into this series. I know we bashed the big 3 with the Heat, but this modified 2A, 2B, big 3, whatever you want to call it.
I would say it's a big 3. Bradley Beal's still making a lot.
Oh, I know he's still making a bunch of money, but it's not the it's not what you would consider like the Bosch, Wade, LeBron James, like high-powered big three, Durant, Thompson,
Not quite to that
Curry
level.
during that run with the Warriors or whatever.
The top two guys are pretty much there for this group. It's that Beal is like not quite at the level of a lot of these other kind of big. Like he's probably not even. Maybe he's not at that Ray Allen level. But yeah,
still a hell of a good player.
He's never had to prove it in the playoffs. So I don't.
Exactly.
He's had some playoff game. He played in the Game 7 Kelly Olynyk series. The famous one that we all know. He's had some trying moments in the playoffs. At least he's played some minutes in the playoffs because it's just is a different animal. But yeah, I think we're just not cohesive for most of the season. It was, and he was hurt, and this guy was hurt. Blah blah blah. Devin Booker's sort of like their point guard now, which he's good enough to do, and was averaging like 8+ assists. But is that the ideal role for him? I don't know. KD was like a couple percentages off of in free throw, another 50, 40, 90 season. So he's as efficient as he's ever been. This feels like it may be actually a good matchup for them, even though it is one of the, 3 teams basically tied for the first seed. But this is probably the one that they would have wanted to play, I almost feel, just because of their size at least kind of matches up well with the front court of Minnesota. And if they are able to just kind of put the clamps on Anthony Edwards, it becomes a lot more difficult, I feel like, to keep up with the scoring that Phoenix theoretically should be able to have. So I don't know. But honestly, all of the West matchups are pretty hype where they are right now.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. There's not much excitement in the East. I don't know
why. If Pelicans Lakers is close, that's the only one I think will probably just be a blowout. But it could be close. And then you got like Zion against LeBron, and maybe they're out in the first round. I would obviously love that. We'll see. But even then, even if it goes the way we think and the Lakers move on, then it's probably Lakers Nuggets, and it's like, okay, here we go.
I believe this is the second year of it. But what do you think about the extra play-in games? Getting 9 and 10 seeds in there to play kind of like a mini round robin tournament before finalizing that 7 and 8 seed. Because I think a couple of years ago we had one of those 9 or 10 teams make it into the playoffs over 7 and 8. I can't remember the exact team, but
it was probably the Heat. I would have. They're usually in these. I don't know if it's. I don't know if they were 9-10 or 7-8 or what. Ironically, I think in the other 2 sports that have this, which is sort of like the NFL added an extra playoff team on each side. The NCAA tournament added these weird little play-in games before the main 64.
I agree with you on the NCAA tournament. I think the NFL is a little bit different because it's not necessarily a play-in game. You're actually in the playoffs in the NFL, where these games don't count for regular season ones. Like, it's playoffs, but it's not really playoffs.
Yeah, that is the weird thing.
Playoffs.
These stats for these games kind of like disappear or become into their own. Like, it's like you can set a play-in record, I guess, but it's not like if you score 70, you're not breaking any Michael Jordan playoff records. You're not breaking any regular season records. It's like someone has 82 and beats Kobe or somewhere up there. It's like, that just kind of disappears in the ether. But anyways, my point was, in those other cases, I don't like that they added games. I don't feel it was necessary. In this case, I love it. And I think it adds a lot to it, especially to the end of the regular season where some of these teams would have just given up and started tanking earlier. Yeah. Or it gives some teams who maybe, get a little hot in the second half a better chance to put something together and actually be there. It's teams like the Hawks, I don't have any reason to be in the play-ins, in my opinion, based on how they played their season out. The East is just like pretty after like the top. I mean, I would have said top 3-4 at the beginning of the season. It doesn't even look like they're that strong now.
No.
But the back half of that 4 through 8 in the East is like, it's pretty interchangeable and weak or whatnot. What are you say?
What? Well, now I got.
A lot of those teams were having problems throughout the whole year. Like the Cavs had guys out through the whole year. They were up and down. They were all over the place. The Sixers had Embiid out a lot of the time. I mean, they obviously would have been a top 3 seed outside of that. But yeah, and then the Bulls and the Hawks, where it's like, I have no interest in watching them play any more basketball this year, to be honest.
Right.
At all. I'm sure you feel the same. You didn't even watch any this year. Like, why would you? So sometimes it works like that. But then in the West, you get Warriors Kings. You get Lakers Pelicans. And the one game playoff just to like get you into it, I'm into it.
My biggest beef with it mainly is like you're getting some bad teams in there. And you mentioned it with the East. Like both the Bulls and the Hawks are below 500. Like you should not be rewarded going into the playoffs. And this, I'll make a It probably
No,
sounds dumb
they're
as
not
shit,
exciting
but,
to watch.
if you have a team that is going to be your 9 or 10 and they're below 500, but 7 and 8 are above 500, just scrap the play-in part. Just let those two other the Bulls and the Hawks have no right to be in the playoffs right now. Like it's where you look at the West, 46 and 36 is your 10 seed. Like that is a solid 10 seed.
Yeah.
Go with that.
Yes.
Go with the play on the West. That works for me.
And you know what? If this is what it is, I'm okay with basically just like throwing away the Hawks Bulls game and not thinking about it and not watching it if it means I get to watch Warriors Kings as the second game or the day after that. Like I'll take the good game if it means we get a little bit. I mean, because it's basically going to be 2 and then 2, I think, and then the playoffs will start. But if you have a bad game over here, well, okay, one of those teams is going to be out and they're gone. Then I get an actual fun game over here, and then whoever won in those two teams probably just going to get their butt kicked by the team that lost the 7-8 matchup. And then I have another fun matchup over here. So I don't know. At least in this, if the fun matches outweigh the not fun matches, I think it's worth it. But the East has not sent their best representatives in recent years because they're not deep enough to send 10 teams to the playoffs.
I'm looking at the standings, and there's only 5 teams that end up not making the playoffs from the West and the East. So it's just like a majority of the teams end up just making the playoffs just because.
After an 80-game season, it is a little crazy to be like, well, like the Hawks were 36 and 46. They were under 500 by 10 games.
And the Bulls have been under 500 almost the entire year. I don't think they ever got over 500. They started out so bad. They were like 2 and 10 or whatever, and then they won 5 in a row, and then they stayed in that same spot basically for the rest of the year.
And neither team was like trying to improve or get better. Like they were resting their players. I mean, Zach LaVine and Trae Young played Trae Young came back and played 3 games or whatever at the end of the year. Zach LaVine's gone or whatever it is, and maybe that's whatever that situation is. But I will say this reminded me of a stat that I heard. I'm not on a podcast. I'm not positive it's 100% true, but the Chicago Bulls GM has not made a trade bringing in a player in 2-3 years. He
first took over the job when he traded for what's his face from Miami, not from Miami, from Orlando.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Vucevic,
that was the trade.
Which was bad.
The Bulls have not made a move to bring in a player outside of free agency or the draft since that trade.
They're not trying to improve, but they get rewarded by getting grandfathered into the playoffs like
and the
this.
Worst part is,
I agree.
I'm a little rant here, sorry, but
we weren't at the rant stage yet.
The Bulls ownership. This is just forgive my language. It's such a crock of shit that they are rewarded by going into the playoffs, yet continue to not care to put a good product on the floor.
No.
And again, this goes into me being annoyed that 9 and 10 are in the East, and they don't even deserve to be in it. They just don't. They're bad basketball teams. You had a full season to try to show what you were worth, and you're just bad. It's not a good product that you're going to be putting out there for playoffs.
I wonder do you think they would ever have a wild card slot for those? If the team that got kicked out of the West was Houston, who was 41 and 41, and was pretty fun for the most of the year and played hard. Would it have made more sense? I mean, they would never because East West and blah blah blah. But could you just chuck them in over the Hawks or something, and then have a little bit more fun? I mean, hell, just put the Spurs in with Wemby. I would be fine with that. They beat the Nuggets the other day. They get the right.
Wemby play than the Hawks and the Bulls. It's just not fun. Here, let me. No. I'm looking at the standings.
If we get more fun than bad, we'll be okay. I wonder if, and I floated this before, and ironically, I don't think it would change anything this year, but I wonder if they'll start involving the in-season tournament and giving some kind of hey, you automatically qualify for the play-in because you made the in-season tournament final, or some kind of incentive for the fans to actually give a crap about that, because it still doesn't really have that to me.
But I could also see that being a problem where, hey, at the beginning of the season, we were all healthy. Yes. We won the in-season tournament, or we made it to the finals for it. Then, player X blew out his knee. Player Z is out with a hamstring injury right now. We're a treated team that I guess now we're automatically in the playoffs.
Yeah, if Memphis had started the year with John Morant and like gone on a run and won the in-season tournament, and then
They're
this
21 and
team
55 or whatever.
got auto qualified with just like basically G League guys, like that probably wouldn't feel good. Or it would be like the Lakers won this year, and they would just like rest LeBron and AD for 20 games to end the year or something because they know they're in. So I don't know, but yeah, I agree that probably specifically because the Hawks are playing against the Bulls, so it's like no team is interesting in that matchup. If they were matched up against other teams, you could at least be like, oh, okay, whatever. I'll go watch the 76ers and Joel Embiid, and they'll play the Bulls.
That would have probably brought in more eyes, or probably will bring in more eyes if that was the setup for it.
To me, honestly, I do prefer. Give me one dud game I don't have to think about if it means I get Sixers Heat. That's way more fun. And then I'll skip the Bulls and the Hawks. But you got 3 fun playing games. As long as there is more fun than dud, I think we're okay. Once we get more duds than there are fun play-in matchups, it's going to start to go sideways. But it's the East's fault.
No,
the West is fine.
Yeah, the West is fine. It's just that makes it all look bad.
Except the Blazers. The Blazers probably should be going to this.
Look at us. Talking NBA for 30-plus minutes. Ooh, baby.
Look at that. Oh, that's what happens with playoffs starting. All right, any quick predictions before we get out of here?
Let's go through each series. And I'm not gonna say who the play-in winner is. I'm just Celtics versus the 8 seed. You're going Celtics, right?
Yes, okay. Even if it's the Heat.
Knicks versus the 7 seed.
I'm
going Knicks.
Boy, Knicks Heat would be real interesting. I will. I'll still probably go Knicks. Knicks. Oh boy. Well, how much is Giannis playing?
I'm going for the bold prediction. I'll say the Pacers win the series.
Honestly, if it's no Giannis for 2 games and it's Pacers versus Damian Lillard playing defense on Tyrese Halliburton, who initiates the entire offense, it does feel like one of those where they'll start out 1-1 or 2-0, and then Giannis will come back and destroy him. But I think I might go Pacers as well. They've had 2 coaches, the Bucks, this year,
and Doc Rivers seems like
now their best players
hurt. Be there anymore. That's the worst part.
And he hasn't exactly had incredible outings in his most recent time as coach for these last 1 time. So that actually might be a bit of an upset depending on how much Giannis plays entirely.
Too much going on inside the Bucks world right now. So I take Pacers in that one. Cavs Magic.
Wow. I definitely think the Magic can win this, and probably will. The Cavs have been kind of all over the place all year, and the smoke with Mitchell and the defense that Orlando can play, the length that they have, in every position, is kind of crazy. It's just a matter of, can they score enough outside of Paolo? Can Franz kind of do enough? Because people are starting to kind of leave him at the 3-point line a little, which can get very scary especially in the playoffs. If you start crossing people off on offense, it's that is a bad recipe. But I like the Magic here.
I was going to go Magic. I was leaning that way too. Call me a sucker for the younger teams. I just think that they're fun to watch right now with Suggs, Franz, and Banchero. And I just think they have the slight edge in this one. I like Donovan Mitchell, but I'm winning Magic on this one. Yeah, right. All right. Thunder, and we'll say the 8 seed. This is one where it really depends on who they get, because I could see AD and LeBron being a problem for the Thunder.
They have such a size Achilles heel. If they play, the Lakers specifically were the one I was looking at as well. The rest of these teams, I think they can survive. Even the Pelicans have some size. I think they'd be able to survive. The Lakers would be a nightmare matchup for them. They have so much experience. That's when you hope that
either the Kings or the Warriors win, so you wouldn't see them, because they would be the higher seed.
Yeah. I'm still going to pick the Thunder. I love watching SGA and the way they play, and I think as long as it's not the Lakers, they won't have a horrible matchup.
Nuggets and the 7 seed. I
Wait,
pick
who'd you
Thunder. I'll
have?
pick Thunder. As long as it's not the Lakers, I'm
Okay.
picking the Thunder.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
could
All right.
definitely see
A lot
Thunder
of
Lakers
consensus going
going
on here.
6, maybe 7. Like that. That could be a fun
Yeah.
series between those two.
I find it hard to think how the Thunder would win that. Honestly, it's so hard to bet against
Like you
LeBron
get
and
that
AD.
deep into the series, I think the veteran leadership of AD and LeBron and the ability that they've been there, they've done it. They are used to the fatigue. They've already played the long season multiple times.
And out rebound them by 25. Like they wouldn't have enough possessions. I feel like unless they're going to the line so much with SGA. I don't know, but yeah, outside of that, I think they have a very good chance. In the
Nuggets
first round.
versus 7 seed. I'm going Nuggets. I don't
Nuggets.
see them losing in the first round. Yeah,
doesn't matter. I hope they get the Lakers so they can kick them out and sweep them again.
Even though that was like the most
entertaining. Remember they played that. They played that close sweep last year. People kept saying, "Oh, it was a close one." They fucking swept them.
I'm with you. I
don't want to hear it. All the games were close, but they didn't win a single one.
Timberwolves and Suns. I almost just said Timbers. Timberwolves and Suns.
Timbers.
I'm going Suns.
Boy. Okay, good. Right, I'm going Timberwolves. Finally, we disagree.
See how right we are in a couple weeks.
This is like the only one we've disagreed on.
Yeah, no, you're right. Clippers and Mavericks. Yeah, I was leaning that way as well. I have a hard time thinking that Luka is going to be stopped, and with Kyrie being a basketball player this year and not a walking headline, I think he's done a great job with the Mavs, and I see them beating the Clippers in this one. As much as the star power big three of the Clippers that they have, I still think the Mavericks end up taking a series.
The Clippers going out in the first round with this payroll while they're building a new arena is going to be that might be a tough summer to kind of figure out what you're doing.
So,
and then James Harden's going to ask for an extension, and you're going to be like,
he's going to ask to be traded again. So,
well, yeah, that's his right. As an NBA player to immediately ask for a trade after an extension.
Quick recap: we got Thunder winning, Nuggets winning, Suns, Mavericks. You had Timberwolves. I had Suns for the West.
Yeah. Well, so do you? Okay. Yes. Do you have any predictions on who's getting out of this play-in? I would guess it's probably Lakers, Warriors, and
Warriors.
Probably Heat and Sixers. I don't.
If the Bulls or the Hawks make it, I'm going to be a little upset on that one.
You know what? If your Bulls make it out and play my Celtics, I'll be so happy. That'll be so nice.
Into the actual playoffs, you're going to see a 10% hike in season ticket sales for a bad basketball team.
Well, okay. Well, so you're rooting against it so that they'll have to be held accountable. Okay. Anti-team. I love it.
Anti-Ryan Forth.
Anti this organization. Yeah, I feel you. Okay, cool. Well, the only other thing I'll say about this is my finals pick is still Celtics Nuggets, and if that happens, we're going to lose to the Nuggets. That's the team I'm actually scared.
Nuggets as well in my final.
We have no way of beating the Nuggets. Jokic is too good.
Never know, man. Hey, sometimes you get one or two calls that go your way.
If we make enough threes, this team loves shooting threes, so if we make a bunch of them, I guess. But it's just not consistent enough offense for me to feel good about.
Well, shall we transition to the college landscape of things now that we've run through the NBA playoff docket? Final Four happened. We had two teams that hadn't made it in 40-plus years.
Yeah.
You had the reigning champ make it to the Final Four. Then you had a team in Alabama that had never made it to a Final Four. And unfortunately, they had to go up against Connecticut, who is just a powerhouse at the moment. So I was wondering, did you watch both games of the Final Four? Did you only watch the championship? What were your thoughts on everything, with the championship being Purdue and UConn?
Unfortunately, I was working through a lot of this, so I can't really say. Honestly, if you want to hear this horrible, disgusting thing that I'm about to say, I didn't watch a single possession of UConn this whole tournament. I don't think. I didn't watch the championship either.
Hey, we
There's
have a
more in the
job,
women's
bro.
tournament this
You
year.
gotta watch these games.
There's more storylines. Yeah, I figured you had this one and I'd do the women's. So I watched the women's games. Okay, well, you went the extra mile. I just kind of assumed UConn was going to do some stuff. And also, I specifically was working during all of those games, so I just was not able to really really able to dive in. But except the championship one, I wasn't working. So
the Final Four in itself, UConn just what they always do. They have teams that sort of play them close in the first half, and then the second half they just blow them out. They had the largest point differential in back-to-back tournaments. This year was even better than last year. And so they made it to the final again. Purdue faced NC State. I thought NC State was going to be that sort of team of destiny like they were in '83 with Valvano.
DJ Burns, right?
Yeah.
DJ Burns, big guy was in there. That's the game I would have liked to watch to see him and Edie go up against each other.
It was a matchup between those two, and it was funny because Burns, like, you could realize that he was normally the bigger guy on the court at all times, and when he went up against Edie, and he was like, damn, you're big. And, like, those two were joking with each other throughout the game. Like, you could tell they were having a good time with the battle, and which is always a fun bonus to the game. Like, you want a good battle between these two, but then those two are, you know, they keep it light where it's not, like, yes, they're competing, don't get me wrong, but, like, it's not vicious or malicious or anything like that. Because sometimes it can get a bit out of hand. But I love what DJ Burns did. He was incredibly fun to watch this entire run. Unfortunately, he just ran into the best big man in the nation in Zach Edey in Purdue. And, Purdue actually didn't even shoot the ball that well in that game. They just ended up feeding it to Edey nonstop. And he had another great game for them and put them into the championship game against UConn. As a Purdue fan, I was thrilled. But I think we talked about this on the podcast the last time where it was, I think I would have rather lost in the Final Four than lost in the championship game because you're just that close. And, Purdue hadn't made it to the Final Four in 44 years. It was the first time I'd ever seen it in my life. First championship game since, like, 1969. Like, we landed on the moon for the first time then. And we haven't been to the championship since. So it was bittersweet. Like, I was so into the game, and Edey looked unbeatable in the first half and what he was able to do. But unfortunately, UConn had a great game plan. It was, we'll let Zach Edey have his, and we're going to prevent everybody else from shooting the ball. Purdue was the number 2 shooting three-point team in the nation this year. They shot 7 three-pointers in this game. Correct.
They attempted 7?
They were 1 for 7 in that game. It's because of what UConn did. UConn was like, all right, we'll let you feed it. We won't double team Zach.
Wow.
We're going to cover your guys on the perimeter. Wow. And if he just wants to go up for 2 every time, we're going to shoot a 3 on the other side. Or we're going to run in transition, make you move. I mean, Zach Edey didn't come out of the game. I think he came out for maybe 25 seconds. So, like, he was dog-tired. There was a point where he made 11 straight points for Purdue. And Purdue was still, I think, losing by, like, a couple points. And it's just, it was not sustainable for Purdue to go up against UConn. Dan Hurley, give credit to him. He had a great game plan. And the Huskies just dominated. Klingon, even though Klingon didn't have the 20 points, 10 rebounds or whatever, he still put up 11 rebounds and he did have double-digit points. But offensively, he wasn't what a lot of people were thinking that the matchup was going to be. I think Zach Edey handled the pressure well. When I say pressure, I mainly mean the opposition of Klingon on him. He's 7'4". Klingon, I think, is 7'1". So he's not used to turning around and actually having somebody's head right at his shoulder. So, it was 2 giants that went against each other for the first time. 2 7-footers went up against each other since I think like 1984. It was Ewing and oh man, I can't remember. Elijah I think. It was Georgetown and Houston that played against each other. It was so long ago that you had 2 7-footers play against each other.
Yeah, that's very much a throwback for what is kind of now 100%. The style of basketball, although it does feel like it's kind of flipping back that way now.
I was going to say, at least, I would say in the college basketball game, that is sort of kind of rolling back to what it used to be. Like the NBA, still 3-point heavy, but you're getting bigs like Jokic, like you just mentioned, but he is he's also a ball handler. Like, people don't realize that just because he's 7 foot, he's not putting himself on the block. Like, he handles the ball, he shoots threes, he does everything. Where
he brings
exactly.
it up.
And Edie has said that, hey, listen, I don't shoot a bunch of threes, but it's because I'm never asked to shoot threes. He's made 1 3 in his career, and he made it like a month ago, 2 months ago maybe. But like, nobody ever covers him out there. He says he can shoot it, but he's never asked to shoot it because why would you have him step out when he's rebounding and dominating the inside? And you already have 4 other players that can shoot threes for you. It just doesn't make any sense to lose that presence inside. Not saying that he's a world beater 3-point shooter. I cannot say that in any way. Yeah,
I'm
not saying that he is. So like, I hear comparisons of like, oh well, the big and you're seeing Jokic dominate the game. But I will be the first to admit that Jokic and Edie are 2 very different games. They might be 2 7-footers.
Well, I would think he's more like an Embiid.
Basket. He's getting rebounds, where Jokic is more of an all around guy. Like, that is just the European style.
I would guess if anything he's closer to like a Joel Embiid, even though he does shoot some threes. Like, a lot of his game is kind of mid range post up kind of stuff, and less facilitating. Like, you can't really compare anybody to Jokic. Yeah. Like, it's just not fair with his passing ability. Like, it's not really comparable. So yeah, maybe an Embiid or something like that is a little closer. But
Edie being useful in the NBA, like.
Well, that's my next big question: is how much did this run improve his potential draft stock? Where was it? Where is it now?
Really
what do you anticipate that looking like?
So he declared for the draft last year, left open his eligibility, and he got good feedback actually of like, hey, you need to improve on this, this, and this. The mock drafts last year had him as like the second to last pick in the second round, where now he is back into the lottery. Like a top 15 pick at sometimes.
Okay.
But they told him he needed to slim down, he needed to get better on his agility, and he needed to work on his endurance. He did all 3 of those this year. And he still solidified in dominating the inside. Like, he still worked on his game and got more with his right hand, more with his left hand, so he can go both ways. And so, and outside of normal big problems, he's a good free throw shooter. You saw him get to the line a whole bunch this year.
That makes a big difference,
You think how dominant Shaq was, but he couldn't shoot a free throw to save his life.
No, he would have averaged 40.
And that is how Edie has gotten a lot of his points, is he's dominant inside, and he'll get an and one. Or he gets fouled, doesn't make the shot, but he goes 2 for 2 at the free throw line. Like, he makes up for it at the free throw line, and I think that is invaluable at the NBA level. He may not be shooting threes like the NBA wants going forward, but there's still a place for a big like that in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely. I mean, DA doesn't shoot any threes for the Blazers. I don't know if that's anything, but even though he has the mid-range ability, but I would assume even once he were, maybe. I don't know why I'm being so sideways on it. He's probably going to get drafted. But once he gets to the NBA, I would imagine just within the course of play, if there are open threes, he'll probably end up taking a couple of those. It'll be more within the offense than maybe what specifically Purdue wanted to do.
There'll be the point where somebody's not going to step out and guard him. He's like, well, I guess I'm open. I'll shoot it. Sure. Like,
that's really the only thing you need to do is, like, if the shot is wide open, you should be able to take it and hopefully make it at a decent rate. Outside of that, just do your thing and play your game. You don't have to completely change everything, but like a Brook Lopez stepping out, it's like, shots there, take it, hopefully you make it a decent rate, and then that doesn't like bring the whole offense to a grinding halt, especially in the playoffs. Like, that's when it gets really bad, is if you're just ignoring a guy because he has no shooting ability, and then it's 4-on-5 offensively. Yeah. So, but his size would never even allow them to do that, because he would still just be able to go in there and make problems happen. So
you look around the NBA, and there are so many guys that are 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", whatever. 7'4" is still a giant.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't many 7'4" people on this earth.
No.
And so, like, he'll be I don't want to say he'll be a nightmare matchup inside, but he's going to cause difficult problems for multiple teams who don't have the size.
Yeah. He's going to pop off the scouting sheet pretty quickly. As just like, there's not a lot. You can defend a lot of guys' games in a lot of different ways, when someone is just really big and tall, that limits your options as far as how you could actually stop them consistently, like without the right kind of personnel or equaling that size or something.
One of the things I'm thinking about too is the rules in the NBA. You can't have the defender in the paint. Purdue just pick and rolled the hell out of every single team this year, and then Braden Smith would just throw it up, and then Zach Edey would slam it down.
Yep.
The best part was Edey only got 6 inches off the ground, and yet it was a monster slam. Again, the size inside where if you have the ability to just toss it up, and granted, there are freak athletes in the NBA, so you're going to have some that break up passes and whatnot, but for the most part, if you can rely on Edey to just kind of toss it up to him and he can get the putback slam or he can alley-oop it down, whatever. Like that, I think that is a useful part of the game as well. Like with a lot of ISO ball and trying to drive into the hoop and still having a big on the block that you can dish it out to, why not take a flyer?
Yeah.
See if he fits into your system.
It's never not going to be helpful to just have a big guy in basketball. That will continue to be true as long as they play.
Favorite Boban last night? I mean, purposely missing 2 free throws. Like that is a big man. Like he doesn't step out and shoot a bunch of threes. Like
Boban.
I'm not saying that.
I don't know if Boban's the comparison you want. Boban's he gets more time in commercials than he does in games, so I don't know if that's exactly.
There's points where.
It's funny guys.
Yes, there are bigs who can survive in the NBA and use their size. Edey's more athletic than Boban, I think, and moves better as well. But my point to that, bringing him up, was just the fact that there are traditional bigs still in the NBA, despite it being a 3-point game.
Yeah, and even some of the ones I'm gonna throw a real bad bull stat at you, which I'm sure you'll like. Some of the ones who have gone out to the 3-point line have done so. And it's not helped their game, like Nikolai Vucevic, who is shooting, I believe, based on like the volume of threes he's shooting the worst percentage of any player in the NBA. The Bulls
traded for him because of the time he was shooting the best, but he was also in Orlando on a bad team.
Right? I think it was like 29% from 3 or something with over 3 or 4 attempts a game. So it's like, yeah, cool, look at me, I'm shooting threes. It's like, yeah, cool. Like, why? Stop, please. Like, take 1 or 2 and maybe you'll make it. I don't know. There's the same thing when Nurk started shooting threes with the Blazers, and it's like, when he makes it, it's great. The crowd goes wild. When you play Charlotte and he goes 4 for 4 to start the game, you love it. Most nights it just kind of goes like 0 for 2 or something, and it's like, he kind of maybe just should have gone to the basket for those possessions.
Even if you go 0 for 2, that doesn't necessarily bother me. It's when you feel like you're just going to keep shooting shots. Like 0 for 2, fine. 0 for 6, that's way too much, man.
Or you're just living out there now and you're not there for chances for rebounds or whatever it is. But it seems like he improved his stock quite a bit. The only other thing I guess I'll ask the men's tournament is, so as someone who's somehow avoided every every possession of UConn basketball, how are they this good? What is it? Is it coaching? Is it the system? Do they have some fantastic prospect players? Or
it was a
just
mixture of coaching and play style. So Danny Hurley, I believe the stat was they lost like 70% of their scoring from last year. They had Donovan Clingan on the team already, but he was behind Sonogo, who ended up being the most outstanding player of last year's tournament. We actually had a 2020 game for the Bulls in their last game.
Didn't know he was on the
been in the G League most of the year. But
I should have seen him then.
They brought in a whole bunch of new players. They had to fill plenty of roster holes, but it's funny. There was a quote I want to say within the last week on a paper from Dan Hurley, and he talked about how the key to bringing in the right players is making sure they don't have annoying parents, basically. That was his words. Overly involved parents, I believe. I don't have the exact quote, so that's a bit of paraphrasing. But he had a couple players that he looked into that he thought could be really productive in the system that he had, and his care for his players that he has, and the drive that he puts in. Like, he expects a lot out of you when you play for him,
right?
And he found the perfect mixture of guys who were selfless and willing to work with each other and on top of Donovan Clingan stepping up his game as well. Clingan was a guy that was, he was a back-end first-round draft pick, I think early second-round draft pick last year, and he has shot up to a top 10 pick this year. So, his growth, and Dan Hurley basically saying, hey, you got to bet on yourself here. Like, if we're going to have a big year, you need to step up.
Yeah.
You weren't quite ready for the NBA. I think he declared last year, then same thing with Edie. Like, got a few notes, ended up going back. So it was a mixture of both things, but, like, he didn't have many of the same guys that he had last year. These were a lot of new faces that he got them to buy in. And
that's crazy.
And, man, they were just as good, if not better, than the team the year before. So I say it all goes down to coaching. Like, don't get me wrong. Players play the game. They're obviously important in what they do on the floor.
But if they're all new players,
you have to bring in the right players, and you have to have them coach up the right way in your system and believe in what they were doing. And Danny Hurley did a great job of that this year.
Well, this may segue into our next topic, or it may not, I guess. So, Danny Hurley, the coach of UConn, is this now like a potential NBA coaching opportunity, or could he go to one of the big blue blood schools like at Kentucky?
Well, Kentucky already filled their spot, but Danny Hurley was one of their top choices. Yeah, so Danny Hurley was one of their top choices, and I believe that was a $100 million deal that was thrown. Yeah, and he turned it down. And he wasn't the only high-profile coach that turned down Kentucky. Danny Hurley talked about it almost immediately after they won. He goes, "Hey, we're going for a three-peat." Unheard of in this team. Obviously, this is the first back-to-back since Florida did it in 06-07. But we haven't had a three-peat since the UCLA days in the 70s, 60s, something like that. So, he...
Yeah, not really in the modern era.
It's definitely not in today's era with transfer portals and people leaving and all that other stuff. It's unheard of to have back-to-back championships.
That would be insane. I mean, just to get back-to-back was, like, pretty insane. Like, the reason I didn't pick them in my bracket was the one little random note that stuck with me was, like, a defending champ has never made the Final Four the next year. So they just wanted to get... So three would be insane.
It's how we did it, too. Like, the 06-07 Florida teams, those were the same starters back-to-back years. And they were all lottery picks.
All new guys.
So, you knew they were going to go back-to-back. Where UConn graduated and lost a lot of players. Like I said, they lost 70% of their scoring. And so, it doesn't look like they were going to retool and make another deep run. But, damn, they look good.
Is there any chance he sticks around if they win 3 in a row? Would he not just immediately become like the Bucks coach or something?
The mayor of Connecticut, dude, or the governor of Connecticut.
Well, yes, because this happened last time UConn won. Who was it? Kevin Ollie, right?
He was their coach then. Years later, because he inherited a Jim Calhoun team.
He got big contracts.
He inherited the team that won.
He almost was the Lakers coach, and then so that didn't quite work out for him
because he wasn't that great of a coach. I don't even know where he's at right now.
Well, he should have taken one of those NBA offers.
Yeah, he should have jumped ship right away. So Kentucky, there was this whole thing that was going around, like USC had their coach
there's like a very
SMU,
big Rube Goldberg machine.
The Arkansas coach Musselman ended up taking the job at USC, which opened up the Arkansas position. There was a hot seat at Kentucky for Cal because he lost again in the first round, but the Kentucky AD basically said, no, he's sticking around. But you could sort of tell it was like he's biting his cheek. Like, we don't want to pay him the $33 million to fire him, so he's going to be back.
Whoa.
So it was kind of like both sides were okay if they separated. So Cal ended up taking the job over at Arkansas, which, I like to think that would be good for him. It's a little bit less pressure than the constant, Kentucky fans breathing down your neck after every single game. And, he could recruit the hell out of everybody. You knew he could recruit. And he went to the Final Four, I think, 3 out of the first 5 years or something like that when he was at Kentucky. And he won a national title. So that buys you a couple years of good grace. But losing 3 times and in 4 years in the first and second rounds for what is the Blue Bloods at Kentucky, fans were not happy. And I think Cal realized it and said, this is not fun anymore. Like, this is not an enjoyable place to be. They've already had multiple decommit from Kentucky since the move now. And so
Well,
you bring up a great point. It's like, well, what about Danny Hurley to Kentucky? And, he turned that down. And Nate Oates at Alabama, who just made the first Final Four with Alabama, he turned it down. So that was an SEC coach for a program that had never really made a deep run. He's like, well, I'm going to stick around.
Yeah,
exactly. But with their ascension to making their first Final Four, they're going to bring in donor dollars. And on top of that, it's what is stopping them from making another deep run? Like, some people's early top 25s next year already have Alabama in the top 4. So why would you want to leave, a well-built program? Which also goes into the next point, too. Like,
exactly.
Drew at Baylor, who just won the national title a few years ago. He's been there for 20 years now. And he said his family was a big reason why he didn't take the Kentucky job. But this is the first time where at least I can remember, where you have a high-profile job and people are not jumping at it.
Yeah,
it's almost unheard of.
The mystique is kind of worn off, or maybe, I don't know, maybe with the way things have changed with transfer portal and all this stuff and eligibility, maybe you don't have to be at those places.
They went after the Bulls coach, Billy Donovan. He's like, I have no interest in going back to college.
Really?
And I don't blame him, because you bring up a great point. I would hate to have to re-recruit my own players that I already recruited once, but to do it daily, just to try to keep them in my program before the season ends. And then, I also still have to recruit other people in, other freshmen. Oh, there's a portal guy that I saw that he's a junior and he's got 2 years of eligibility that I recruited 3 years ago. Like, I need to go get him. Like, it's just never ending. And
you're on like quicksand so much more with kind of all of your player roster stuff there, where it's like, it's to an extent that's true in the NBA or whatever, where it's like, I have to keep this guy happy or else for a trade. But it is like, okay, he does have a contract. I don't have to keep up with it quite as much, even if just simply by, coaching well and winning games, most of the time you're going to keep these guys around rather than like convincing them. And I don't know. I enjoy the fact that a lot of the times these coaches who would have make promises and then bring players on and kind of forget about them now have to actually keep up with that and stay up with that. But it doesn't make it easier for the coaching gigs. Used to be the easiest gigs around. You'd be the highest paid state employee, but now it's like it's actually getting harder.
Oh, you gonna give any money back? Not a dime back. Not a dime back. Like,
yeah,
I earn that money.
So you get paid the big bucks. Yeah, maybe your job should be a little harder. I don't know. I'm not feeling that bad.
Hiring a guy that we are somewhat familiar with, loosely, the former BYU coach, Mark Pope. He is a former Kentucky player, won a national title with them as I believe is the starting guard for their team back in the 90s. Kentucky fans are not happy,
That's not an exciting hire.
About it. It's not your first crush. It's not your second crush. It's not even your third or fourth crush. It's your Valentine that you got in third grade. That was like, I guess I'll take a flyer, whatever. Like, it's.
Oh, he used to play on the team, I guess.
And so, like, that's how you can sort of play it for those Kentucky fans. But what has he done? He hasn't done a whole bunch. Like, he's made it to 2 NCAA tournaments. Never made it past the first round as the head coach of BYU. Made it to a couple of NITs.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if that's really a feather in your cap. Like, you had a good enough season to go to the postseason, but it's not the postseason you want to be in. So, like, it wasn't the big splash hire that Cal was 10-plus years ago when they hired him.
Yeah, and if nothing else, I mean, it's probably you just want, like, you want one of the big-name coaches, the personality coaches. Like, that's kind of what's kept college basketball alive for a long time. That's kind of one of the things that the women's game is now kind of catching up with them, where they have these like very personality driven coaches that and are on the sideline making loud noises and wearing loud clothes.
They lost the Stanford head coach, Tara Vanderveer. She retired. She was there for 42 years.
Oh.
Although I don't blame her for retirement. Her school just joined the ACC. Yeah. And so the amount of travel you would have to do going back and forth, what seems like every weekend, like I would not want to do that either. Like I understand the move, Stanford and Cal had to find a new home conference-wise. But, man, that is just going to be a brutal schedule.
Yeah, I just wish...
So, I talked about it with
I just wish
Jennifer
the
Mountain,
football
our
stuff
coworker
was
and
separate.
Shots. I talked about it. I was like, man, Stanford going to the ACC. I don't see Tara staying there, retiring. I can definitely see that. And we all were kind of on the same page. She'll probably go as far as she can with Brink, and then maybe just kind of call it quits. And that's ended up what happened. I mean, they lost. I believe it was in the Elite Eight, and lo and behold, she retired in this past week. And I mean, good on her. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that travel.
It did. Yeah, it seemed like the right time because that just sounds very stupid. The whole thing. But so I get why you would not want to participate in that. She's had plenty of success already.
This is not the only. I don't want to say exodus is the word, but the exit of players from former Pac-12 teams and coaches. 4 of the 5 starters for Oregon State have already entered the portal because they're moving down. Down a conference. They're coming to the West Coast Conference, which honestly is some pretty solid basketball in the top half. But it's definitely not Pac-12 basketball. You're not playing Juju Watkins at USC again, and you're not playing UCLA and some of these other top-tier programs that were in the Pac-12 this past year because everybody's
you're just in such a weird situation too because it's not even like you're like, okay, cool, we're WCC. It's like you're in this weird purgatory where you're like Pac-12 schools playing in the WCC, but what's the future of that and then where's the fun? So for the players, it's like they have a max 4 or 5 year career in college playing basketball. There's no reason that they should wait that long for their schools to figure their shit out. They need to go somewhere where they can play their best basketball if they want their career to continue after that. If they blah blah blah, whatever they want. It's their timeline is so much shorter than the schools or the organizations or the educators that it doesn't make sense to mess around. Some of the Oregon State fans are all mad about it, but it's like I mean, you can't. They're not that bad at the players, obviously, because you can't be. Because what else would you do? You have to.
Yeah.
You have to leave.
If you want to keep that competition level that high and where you want to play, you're going to have to leave. That's just how it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's a bummer it's happening. The football money kind of screwing up all the other sports, but here we are, and it's going to continue to happen. It feels like
it's kind of a shame.
It's a weird situation. It is because that was like an Elite Eight, Final Four-esque kind of team that they put together. It could have maybe made another run at it.
I would say they could have run right through the WCC most likely. I mean, Gonzaga would have been the toughest opponent for them, and they are a tough team. You have to give them that credit there, but
and us,
that's.
And the champs, and the WCC champs, they might have given us some trouble.
Trouble when you do that full court pressure that they do. God, I would hate to be a player on an opposing team against that team.
100%.
Speaking of the women's team, let's move on over to the women's side of things. Carolina and Iowa faced off in the championship game. Caitlin Clark went to the national title game for the second year in a row.
You're going too quick.
I'm briefly recapping what the championship was.
Too quick.
I would say my most anticipated watch of that weekend though was UConn versus Iowa, Beckers and Caitlin Clark. The Final Four match.
Yeah. In the really matchup leading into that Final Four, where we had all the stars. It was
LSU
wasn't it
Iowa.
It was LSU versus Iowa, the rematch from last year with the finger wagging or the pointing. And then it was UConn versus Juju Watkins and USC,
that was
I believe.
Incredible.
So, yes. And so that's the regional matchup, and then it goes into the Final Four, and then you bring South Carolina, the behemoth, into it, and Iowa gets all the way there. And there's just so many more stars in the women's game right now than the men's game. It's blowing up. And it's what college basketball
100%.
Used to be for the men, where it's like we got to know a lot of these players last year. They had big personality coaches. And then they all came back, and we got to do this again with them and become more familiar. Like Caitlin Clark's run last year was really fun. and she lost to Angel Reese, and we saw all of that, and Paige was hurt, and UConn's always a presence, South Carolina's there, and LSU won. So now we get to come back, all the storylines come back into it and get refreshed. Like, that's why college basketball was so successful when it was in its heyday. I would probably say, like, the 90s.
Yeah, like late 90s, maybe.
I mean, I guess
2000s.
all the way up to that, and then it kind of went sideways. But the women's game has kind of figured out a way to have a lot of those aspects again. And the tournament was crazy. It felt like the bubble was kind of happening for them again. I saw a lot of rating statistics about how, I mean, some of those games were like basically more watched games than NBA finals have been in like 20 years. Like a lot, pretty much everything other than like major NFL Super Bowls, it was basically equaling or bettering. So, and for that momentum to go into it, and now hopefully be transferred now with Caitlin Clark going pro and Angel Reese and some of these players, if they can transfer, if they can,
Caitlin Clark is
if they can transfer that hype to the WNBA
back onto TV. They had one TV game last year, and they already have like 35 guaranteed for next season.
The season tickets are already selling out all over the place, so it's exciting if they can keep this going and keep this momentum and build it into the WNBA, where they have even more play. Like, then it can actually start to get hype. I feel like the scheduling of the WNBA, they need to find the time when there's, ideally it would be, I feel like right after this NBA playoffs, in the dead zone where it's just baseball in the summer. It's like that is such like a kind of ripe opportunity for the WNBA to be cresting into its peak, I feel like, because you can't be going against football or basketball or a lot of these other MLB playoffs or whatever it is. If you can find that gap and take over that whole time, like, then you'll actually become like one of the major, like, kind of pinstone or whatever kind of major milestones of the year for sports.
They start mid-May. May 14th is when they start. So, like, you're getting the tail end of college baseball, which is right into regionals, then the College World Series. You're getting right into the middle of the NBA playoffs.
When does that? Well, when does that put their
playoffs are at the end of the summer?
That means
so, like,
October, like MLB kind of era.
Let's see.
Timing.
September 22nd
I would have
is when
to guess.
The playoffs begin. So just as football season is
not
getting to the swing of things.
That's what's scary. Like that. So you're losing everybody. I mean, you're not, but you're losing the potential of those. I want it basically like playoffs starting right after the finals.
The thing is, though,
I feel like be ideal.
If you want the women's playoffs to start right after the NBA finals?
I think so.
You would need to start the women's season earlier then. That or have more games condensed into their season.
Yeah, I don't know.
See, it's kind of weird. The WNBA is
logistical.
in a weird spot in the season because they do the WNBA draft like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever, right after the NCAA tournament, and then a couple weeks later the WNBA season starts. Like, that doesn't even happen in the NBA. That doesn't happen in the NFL. None of that. Like, and I'm talking about the quick
turnaround
of being drafted and then season starting.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
In the NFL, you get drafted in April. The season doesn't start until August.
Yeah, you do a whole camp.
You've got 4 months, basically, until your first game. Honestly, why not? Like, I think you would get more eyes on the women's game if you started it around the same time as regular basketball season starts.
Yeah, or honestly, like right after March Madness, if it's just like, and
like,
bam, now we're into it.
Like, they're in a weird spot because
here's a crazy thing. This is maybe dumb, but I heard this also on a podcast, and I thought it was fascinating. What if every draft happens before the season starts, right? What if that didn't for the WNBA? What if it was like a mid-season trade deadline kind of thing, but it was the draft? So it's like, and I know that seems weird and bizarre and crazy, and that might not work, but if you go into your season, it starts so you can get a head start on it, and then March Madness ends, and people go into the draft, and you basically like have like your All-Star break or whatever for the WNBA, and then you have your draft, and you just add those players to the second half of your season, and immediately, I mean, it's very different than it's ever been done, but I think it would be fascinating just because the timing would work better, and then it would add a wrinkle of like, hey, we're going to start with our team halfway through. We're just going to draft some rookies, and it might actually like substantially change the makeup of the team or be more impactful than a trade dedeadline kind of might be for some teams. Crazy idea.
One, you're going right from one season into the next season if you're a college player.
It'd be tough for the college players.
You're just going to have the fatigue factor of that one.
But it's half a season, at that point.
It's a half a season already added on to the full season of the college year.
Look, like I said, this may be very dumb. It's just it started kind of floating around in my brain, and I was like, what would it even be as an experiment just to have a draft
get
mid-season?
Released, because a player gets drafted, in the middle of your season.
Yes. Yep.
I'd be floored.
Yep.
I'd be floored if they did that.
Chaos.
Just because the draft was there. If I wasn't good enough, you cut me in the middle of the season, then that's fine. But if you cut me in the middle of the season because you drafted 4 players.
Hey, but now you got half a season to pay, whereas I would have cut you before the season if we'd had the draft regularly.
If that was the case,
so,
I would have gone and played professionally elsewhere.
Yeah, I would have had enough time. Yeah, I know. It'll never happen because it's not a very good idea. But I did some aspects of it I thought were kind of interesting as a wrinkle to throw into a season. But yeah, the timing is tough. So maybe it's even – the thing is you can't make it go longer because football just keeps picking up after September on. So it's like if you're not doing it before September, you're missing
I feel like some of that is overplayed. You got to pick and choose your battles.
True, and
it's games on Sundays. Don't play on Sundays.
But the NFL's taking every day. They're starting to take every day.
Every day.
Yes, for the most part, it is
on Sunday.
Okay, here's your Saturday, Sunday.
It's just
playoffs.
Tip off
Tuesday,
is
Thursday.
at 5 p.m. or whatever, and NFL starts at 8 p.m. Not that they're on the same channel, but I'm just saying you could watch one and then move on to the next one. Tuesday, Wednesdays are open. Granted, you probably don't want to do back-to-backs. Thursday football is always trash.
I would just want to clear it out.
Friday? You tell me you can't have Friday games?
I would just want to clear it out as much as possible. That's why, and there's nothing in the summers. Not only are you getting, because it's some people are just I'm just going to watch a game a week, and that game is football now. If you're in the middle of the summer and you're just starving for sports or starving for basketball after the NBA Finals has ended, and then, oh my gosh, now the WNBA is picking up into playoffs. There's nothing on but baseball. Maybe you're not into that as a viewer. This would fill that gap. Is the kind of hope that I would have for positioning it there. I don't know if logistically it makes much sense, and you can still survive if it's going into the football area. I just think I start diverting. College starts, NFL starts, and nobody's starving for basketball at that point maybe anymore. I don't know. That's kind of the one big advantage I could feel like they could still harness, but they're in an incredible spot right now that they haven't been for a long time. So they gotta keep. They got to keep this rolling
on the court and everything else like that. And Taurasi in the early years, nobody had this much buzz in the WNBA as it does right now. I honestly believe that if you, I'm not saying put it up against the NBA schedule, but you time it out with the NBA schedule. I don't think you're competing in that market against each other for viewership. I think whoever likes basketball is going to like basketball and is going to seek it out.
Yeah.
I would be the first one to admit it, over the last 5 years, and it's directly related with me working, but I've found women's basketball to be way more entertaining at times, and I'm more engaged with women's basketball than I am necessarily with men's basketball at times, especially at the college level. It's...
I shouldn't really feel that way about soccer specifically. I way more enjoy watching women's soccer than men's soccer because of a multitude of reasons. I can go into that at some point, but I legitimately feel that way by a mile.
When I think about women's basketball, again, this is from my knowledge and us working at UP, but dude, our women's basketball team kicks ass.
That's the big thing too.
The 40 minutes of constant pressure, always in your face, forcing turnovers, and it's a fast-paced game, up and down. Where sometimes I can watch some of our men's games, and it's while we gag down, let me shoot up a quick 3. All right, one and done. We're going the other way. I love the pressure in your face defense that, again, this is our squad that does it, so I'm seeing it all the time, but
yes,
that is so much more entertaining basketball and the chaos with it compared to the normal one possession three, and we're going the other way, and all right, here's one pass and a layup, and like the women's game has evolved so much. I would say even over the last 10 years, like everybody's gonna focus in on the last 3 or 4 years, but even the last 10 years, like it's just been so much better. Like, and the parody sounds bad, but I don't mean it in a bad way, because like the way that women's basketball is now is completely different than what it was in the early 2000s. Like, you have 5, 6, 7, 8 teams that could compete for a national title this past year. 16 years ago, you're like, it's Tennessee and UConn. And nothing against them. They were
UConn won 150 games in a row by 20 points. Like, that brings its eyes to the sport, but also it also is like, it's so top heavy. You don't have a lot of variety there. Whereas now, it was like that. The regional Elite Eight felt like its own Final Four just by the stardom, and they weren't even to the Final Four of the championship yet. So as long as you can continue to build stars,
the stats don't lie. More people tuned in for the women's tournament this year than the men's. Like that's just a fact.
Yeah, I mean, I'm among them. I actually was at a bar when the LSU Iowa game was happening, and had like that controversial call at the end, and everyone in the bar was like, "Oh, come on!" And I was like, "Let him play." And some of the other people were like, "That's the right call. She got up in there." And I was like, "Yeah, but you swallow your whistle at the end." And it's like, okay, we're starting to get to pretty much the same conversations we have with NBA and stuff. That's when you know you're
women's basketball.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm like, once you get into that situation where you're mad that they're making calls when maybe they should have let them play, or it was a technical, like, I think that's a good spot for them to be in, because we're getting there. We're getting there.
Exciting.
It's exciting.
Credit to South Carolina. They ended up winning the national title over Caitlin Clark. You know, Iowa came up short again.
Yeah,
an undefeated season for South Carolina, but I love what.
Yeah. Insane. That's the quietest part of this, is they went undefeated and won the championship, but everyone else.
What I feel like this is different than what UConn was when they went undefeated for whatever. It was like Dawn Staley seemed more almost personable. I'm not saying that Gino isn't. I love Gino. I think Gino's a great coach and very open and willing to talk to the media. But Dawn just talked about how it's like we're in the tournament right now and we can't lose. We're undefeated, and that pressure adds even more to it. And I don't remember ever hearing Gino say anything like that. Maybe he did, but like it was sort of refreshing to be like Dawn's being like, we're not going to run through this tournament like everybody thinks it. Like, people are coming after us. These are closer games. Like they did end up winning, I believe, by double digits against Iowa and in their Final Four matchup, but
they were losing after the first quarter.
Hot in that first quarter, but like she knew the immense pressure that was on the shoulders of that program, and didn't necessarily shy away from it, but even opened up the door a little bit to let everybody know, like, hey, like this isn't easy, guys. Like, this is really hard, and there's even more pressure on it to go undefeated now that we're in the tournament. Like, I talked about this with Jennifer Mountain before the men's tournament started. She's like, "Oh, Purdue lost in the semifinal in the Big Ten tournament." I was like, "I would have rather lost that than go into the tournament and like undefeated or whatever." Like, I feel like that's overlooked so much or overvalued, of like winning your conference tournament after you won the regular season. Like, honestly, might be good to lose a game. Really kind of reinforce what we need to change around here.
Yeah, it wakes you up. If you're going to lose it, you'd rather lose the one that doesn't eliminate you than the one that does.
So I love what Dawn Staley's done. I mean, that's her third national title now with South Carolina. First one with an undefeated season. I mean, she was the face of women's basketball when it deservedly got its platform, in the 90s and everything, and being that Team USA, I think it was the not the Dream Team, not the Redeem Team, because that was like the 08 men's team. But that first Olympic women's national basketball team, it's bugging me that I can't remember the name of that team. Right. But she was a face of that team, along with multiple other women. And so it's great to see her rise through the coaching ranks and see her be successful where she's at now at South Carolina.
You think she's just going to stick around and build an empire, or is she a WNBA candidate? NBA candidate? Big three?
If she goes to the NBA, that's a different story. I don't see her going to the WNBA. There's just not enough financial backing for her coaching expertise to take up that much money.
That might not even be a lateral for her at this point.
For her, I bet you it's easier to stay in college, even though we just talked about what a nightmare it is to probably re-recruit your players. But when you're winning at that level,
but once you got it going in college, I don't know why you'd ever leave. It's why Saban never went back to the NFL. It's just so much. Even if it is it's getting a little harder, it's it's still incredibly easy. You can just kick the guy to the curb and get another 5-star.
Especially when you have a program that is constantly winning. People want to go there.
I'm just here to poke at Saban's resume every day. That's what I do. Come back to the NFL.
Any other thoughts on the women's tournament or women's basketball in general?
No thoughts. A+.
I did like the Indiana Fever doing the, I believe it was 22 days until the WNBA draft. I was like, oh, fitting. Who wears 22?
Interesting.
The other big story around professional sports, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Do you speak Japanese? I don't. But the interpreter for Shohei Ohtani is in more trouble than I think anybody initially anticipated. I think a lot of people thought a lot of this was on Ohtani, and we're now realizing that Ohtani
more debt than I thought.
Was oblivious in a way.
Taken for a ride a little bit.
Shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But the original story was his interpreter ended up taking $4 million from him. It turns out after some forensic accounting, whatever that means, I'm not smart enough for that, $16 million was stolen from Ohtani. And
Jesus.
And
he didn't notice.
That's ranging from $10 to, I believe it was like $19,000. This is a guy who won $140 million in gambling. And you're like, holy cow, $140 million? Then you realize he lost $180 million. Which is...
That's impressive.
I am a little impressed. It's like, how do you win 140 but lose 180? And then it was
insane.
Determined that he didn't bet on any baseball. So, kept the integrity of the game. Cool.
I'm shocked he stopped there, honestly. Once you're a degenerate level gambler at that amount of money and stuff,
Ohtani,
why would anything be across the line?
All the time.
Yeah, made it so he must have had some kind of semblance of an idea of well, I don't want to stretch this thing too far. I could get into trouble. Yeah. But he still was it's such a weird dichotomy there already.
And it turned out that Ohtani's mom, I guess, took care of most of his finances when he first came over to the States. And then his interpreter started to get involved. His interpreter ended up turning off notifications on Ohtani's phone, so he wouldn't get the notification when money was transferred out. It was I don't want to say Ohtani was naive, because it's a little difficult to be naive when you're in he's in a country that he's not accustomed to anybody, and this guy's supposed to be interpreter / best friend who's one of maybe 5 people you can talk to in your native language on a regular basis. And you're thinking that this guy is looking out for your best interest and trying to help you succeed. This guy answers every question for you. He translates everything for you. He's around you basically 24/7.
You just give him your phone sometimes for who knows how long, and he changes notification settings.
Hand him your phone. I don't know, but that's...
Oh, I don't know. Let me open up your bank account here. Hold on.
It's an insane story.
It's kind of crazy.
This guy, he's been federally charged. He's already out on bond right now. But it's...
What's the part of this that's kind of crazy, and I don't really know, so I could be totally off on this, but from a lot of the Japanese culture that I've seen and experienced through video games or whatever it is, they have such a kind of inbuilt system of almost so many people there take English as a second language because they know that it's so helpful for all the kind of English speaking media stuff that goes on in the world that comes out of America. A lot of them will just learn that in class very early and have some kind of stuff. It's wild to me that he's the one guy who is just like, not at all. I just have an interpreter. I'm good to go.
I think
when he's like this $1 million baseball player.
I think he knows English, but it's more of what is he comfortable with. Like Wanze knows English for us at UP, but you never hear him speak because he's not comfortable with it.
Yeah. And like I said, at that point, it's like, I don't know what I'm talking about. That's totally fair. It's a little surprising to me because of all the countries. It seems like Japan is very on top of it as far as like a lot of their citizens can speak English as a second language. So it's just a little surprising to me that the most famous, expensive baseball player maybe of all time, kind of just skipped those classes early on.
Because English and now he's is the paying second language in like
he's paying
95 countries.
Yes, and here I am. I can't speak any other language. So like again, I'm a big dum dum. I'm a big dum dum. But I was a little surprised by that, and it could not have bitten him more in the butt. So now the question is he taking English lessons, or is he just buying a new interpreter?
I guess he's got a new interpreter.
Hiring a new interpreter.
I do the Ellie De La Cruz thing and learn as much English as I can. I don't care if it's broken up. Just I got to speak for myself now, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe lock your phone, something. Have your own passwords for some of those accounts. We mostly joke. It is an insane story of this guy who just had access to a really rich friend and continued to gamble, even though he maybe wasn't that good at it.
He's known to be a liar. Sorry, to get wrapped up in the court over here. He's known to be a liar in the sense that, like,
I don't love that.
To school. I believe it was like UC Irvine, or maybe it was Riverside. It was one of the UC schools in California, but like, there's no documentation of him being at that university. Okay. So, like, guys, who's doing the background check here? Who is checking up on any of this stuff? Like, it seems like there should be some checks and balances.
How is Ohtani even sure he's
this stuff and people missed badly?
I'm now very worried that he was not necessarily always accurately translated for Ohtani either, because if he was lying about all this other stuff, I don't know why he wouldn't be kind of fudging and neglecting some things and sweetening some things, and like that is just but that's a tough situation for him coming to a country not speaking the language as it is and trusting this guy and him completely taking you for a ride. But maybe when you're a $1 billion player, you shouldn't have your mom doing all your finances. I don't know. Like, maybe you should go to a professional, or maybe she's in on it too. Maybe she's a big gambler. See, now I don't want to any better.
May have heard some rumblings. Maybe that's why he had his whole contract deferred. You know, hey, you can't be taking money out of my account if it's
something
not
to
there.
Think about.
Right?
It's like,
or that was
how much credit can you ring up?
You know, check yourself moment for the interpreter. Like, hey, maybe defer some of this so I don't have to feel like I need to steal some more money from. Like, it's just.
He was trying to stop himself the only way he could, which is. It's like when you don't buy bad food at the grocery store, you're like, okay, now I'll be healthy because I didn't buy any candy. It's like, well, you ate a lot of bread there that night, though. I don't know if you should be doing that.
But yeah, he's out on a $25,000 bond, so he's out walking around.
Well, all he really did was like steal from his friend, right? Like, I guess he wasn't illegally gambling on stuff. He was just stealing from his friend and using those funds to gamble.
Isn't gambling legalized in California?
Like, luckily, this didn't all blow up into another.
I don't know. Now I gotta Google it.
Yeah, I think so. Feel like it is. It's weird now because you can kind of do it anywhere online. I feel like so. But yeah, you're right. Part of the original thing was he was doing this through like an illegal bookie, which is just very strange to me in this day and age. Maybe that's an amount of money thing that
legal
he just wasn't able to do through
gambling in the U.S. state of California include card rooms, Indian casinos, the California State Lottery, parimutuel wagering. I don't know what that is. What is it?
You have a lottery. The lottery has just been a thing for
they use it as
decades,
a way
and nobody cares.
Schools and all this other stuff, which we kind of know isn't always
good. Well, that's why our schools are so well funded, I guess, right? We're going sideways with this. It's good that this wasn't a huge MLB scandal or anything. Like, it did kind of just end up being a funny, kind of weird situation. Like, this is going to be a great Guy Ritchie movie or something in 10 years. Can't wait. But,
30 for 30.
or maybe Safdie's brothers. Oh, this will be the new Safdie brothers after they made Uncut Gems. This feels like that kind of vibe. Although that might be too on the nose.
That is gambling. So
it's literally all about gambling too. Yeah, so I don't know, but there's something there. But it's good that this isn't going to be another White Sox,
I think there's a sense
another
of
stain
around Major League Baseball that
wasn't working
Ohtani
with
was not
games.
directly gambling.
Yes, because this is your new biggest star, and so to have him sign the contract in the summer and then it all falls apart after that is like, boy, that would have taken him back another 10 years probably or something.
On the game itself.
It's good. Yeah. So it's probably, all things considered, the best way this could have turned out, I guess.
This probably was. For the sake of baseball, definitely.
And if the worst thing that happened is the billionaire pitcher lost some money, it's like, okay. Well, he didn't even notice at the time, so all right. He'll get it back probably.
Any other notes on this interpreter situation?
I'm all noted out. I think I got it out there. Even some of the stuff I shouldn't have probably
that
said.
brings us to the nerd corner in a different aspect. I'm sort of asking the question this week, or kind of running.
Yeah, I've already forgotten, so this is good. I'm fresh.
I want your thoughts.
I remember now.
On re-releases. It seems like everybody's doing one right now. It's kind of a way to maybe bring life back into theaters with some of these well-known names that, like, and when I say names, I mean movie titles that are coming back in. Ones off the top of my head, like, I know Blazing Saddles is coming back for a 50th year thing. TV shows even are doing it. Like the original Transformers, they're doing a 40-year anniversary thing. They're showing the first 4 episodes in theaters. And then, Interstellar, kind of like the more recent one. They're doing a 10-year re-release in IMAX.
Yeah. I think
that one I actually saw in IMAX the first time, and I thought it was incredible. So I might have to buy in on that one just to go see it in IMAX again, because it's different watching it at home than in the theater. But
I would like to see that one again in theaters and to watch it again. I don't think I've seen it since I saw it originally. It's not one of my favorite Nolan movies, but in this recent kind of Nolan rewatch and stuff with Oppenheimer, that was at the top of a lot of people's lists, which kind of surprised me a little bit. So it's one that I probably need to go back and watch again, because the magic bookshelf at the end really threw me for a loop the first time I watched it, and now at least maybe with that context of knowing where it's going, I'd be a little more prepared.
My favorite parts of that movie, and it's going to not sound like super endearing or whatever, but when you're in the theater and the realness of the Hans Zimmer music, like specifically when he's trying to reattach to the space hub or whatever. But then you get
that sequence is incredible.
And there's no music. There's nothing.
Yeah.
It's just the emptiness of space. And the lack of sound, I think, adds more to the scene than even if like the music of Hans Zimmer in it.
Yeah.
Like those, it's so minuscule, but like those little details of the void of space being taken into account for it.
I'm gonna have to go see this again. I enjoyed so much of like how seriously they took all the science for 90% of the movie, and were very particular on it. This is exactly how all of this would happen, and this, and like the fucking crazy wave planet they go to with the insane gravity and the time differential, all that stuff was fascinating. That's why when they got to the end and they're like, "What's in a black hole?" and they're like, "It's behind." And then I thought for a moment I was like, "Oh, the movie's just over. They all are just dead now, or something." And then they get kind of like, I don't know what you want to call it, magical realism or something, and it becomes like the answer to all the questions are love. And Nolan's not necessarily the best at doing that emotional stuff.
More of the depiction of what could be. You know, we're 3-dimensional creatures. What could be the 4th dimension? Was what he's getting at with the bookshelf scene.
Maybe. Well, that's why. Yeah, I'm gonna have to see it again, because that one really.
I mean,
definitely did throw me for a loop.
And I guess that does bring up the aspect of Princess Diaries lady, Selena Kyle. I can't remember the actress's name off the top of my head. Yes, there we go, Anne Hathaway.
Anne Hathaway?
There is that little love aspect for her, and that ending scene when she basically puts that guy's patch on his body when she was fighting so hard to try to go to that planet because his beacon, was going off as if he was still alive, but they had to separate. There were so many things that I enjoyed about that movie, and like that.
The Matt Damon cameo came out of nowhere. That still probably holds up. Yeah, he becomes a villain. Yeah. All right. And this is it's probably one of the few Nolan movies I've only ever seen the one time. It's one that I have to revisit.
No, my question was, what are your thoughts on re-releases in general?
Yes.
It seems almost like a cash grab for some people, but also, as I mentioned, alluded to, maybe a way to get life back into some theaters by getting well-known entities back onto the big screen.
So I think that's the big first point to this is, like, theaters are dying in general, and I think they're just trying to find any kind of way that they can to stay alive. For years, I've been kind of saying this as well, like, they should do sporting events here. They should be NFL Sunday in one of these rooms on a Sunday. They should do this.
Theater back home outside of Chicago, they actually did have something on Sundays for Bears football games. There was an entire theater upstairs, and you could fit 100 people in there, and they served food and everything else like that for those games. But it was only for NFL.
Yep,
it was just a Sunday.
Yes, and I mean that's why we're seeing some more like. I don't know what to call them, like kind of unique theater setups where they will, like you said, like where you can get beer and have a table, or they'll bring you food, or you can order food at the table, or whatever. So there's different kind of theater experiences in that regard. It's probably easier to just bring a classic movie back sometimes. And this is it's a great idea. Like here's Jurassic Park 1995, watch it again in theaters, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure it is. Like any of the big one, like Jaws in the summer. Most every summer, I think they do like a Studio Ghibli kind of thing where it's a lot of the Regal ones that I've seen where it's like we're going to show a different Studio Ghibli movie for every weekend throughout these 3 months or whatever. So a lot of it is that. It is like a bit of a dying industry, a bit of a let's see what we can do to spice this up, get some cash in here. The other big one I think for a lot of this is like I feel like, and I might be wrong, I feel like a lot of these are movies that came out during COVID when all this fell apart. So, like, Tenet was one of the ones that I saw was recently being re-released, which was a attempt to bring people back to theaters at the time, and it failed, and we went back into another COVID kind of bunker situation. Yeah. I mean, there's also that. So that movie didn't get, like, a full, actual widescreen kind of release in theaters. So now, if you bring it back now, you can actually do it again. Like, honestly, like, they did it with Dune, right? And Dune's another movie. I mean, they did it because Dune 2 was coming out as well and all that. But but Dune was another movie that came in, day out with HBO Max versions. So, like, they're maybe kind of giving it another chance at having an actual run now. So, it's a little. I think those are probably the two big aspects of it happening right now. But I mean, it's good. I quite enjoy it. It is gimmicky and cash grabby, but it's also like. I don't know, like it's if there's so many movies that you probably would never have had a chance to see on the big screen. That's one of my all-time
favorites, and they're having a 50-year that are absolute classics run that they're putting it back in theaters. Like, well, I'm only 30, so obviously I wasn't around for the initial run into the theaters. Like that one actually seems like it could be fun to kind of be around people who understand and appreciate the humor, because I feel like that's just lost on a whole bunch of people now.
Yeah.
And two, it's just a new experience that I think most people with the older movies will never experience.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many movies now that like, given the option of seeing it on a big screen would be very exciting, like an original Blade Runner or an original Star Wars or like kind of whatever you want to go see, like a 2001: A Space Odyssey kind of thing, like big spectacle movies that came out in their time, and now you can watch them at home, and a lot of the home stuff has like gotten to that level. But if you're going to release in the theaters, that's like actually like a legitimately different experience of that movie that may be worth actually going to. And I love going to movies. I would never go to a movie and then like fall asleep halfway through that movie. That's not something.
That's not my
That's not something I would disgrace the theater with. I would never do something like that. So it's fine. We don't have to talk about it. I may have had a recent attempt where something went sideways. I fell asleep. So, but hopefully that doesn't happen when you see the re-released classic.
Overall, would you say good, bad, sort of indifferent on it?
I falling asleep in the movie theater bad. I didn't enjoy it. It really made me mad. I wasted time and money, and I didn't see the half of the. I don't feel like I'm talking about the movie because I didn't see it. So, gosh, that really messed me up. But yeah, in general, I love it. I mean, growing up in Idaho, we always had like an old style theater that would just show older movies, like Young Frankenstein, Leah Mel Brooks, like that kind of stuff. It can go more into the this becomes sort of a different thing, but it becomes. You can get into like the Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of screenings where everyone. I'm not super familiar with that movie specifically, but or like The Room where it's like people are throwing spoons at the screen kind of thing, and everyone's reciting the movie. That has its own place. That's kind of another level of this. I feel like I may not necessarily always want that experience when like going to see Interstellar and everyone's just yelling at the screen or something like that. Might not be the second time I want to watch it. If it's like an all-time classic, the 10th time maybe.
Like that.
No, I don't think so. For not till the sing-along version comes out in another 10 years. But those kind of screenings have their place and are very fun. And it's kind of the same kind of vibe. It's just, I don't know. You release a classic, it can be a little easier than putting out whatever kind of random take your chance on a movie made by whoever in a weekend. So it's great. We'll keep the theaters rolling a little bit longer, and there are definitely movies where seeing it on the big screen
100%.
Can make a huge difference, and that's really the only way. It's really the only way you're going to get a chance to for a lot of these is if they just feel like doing it again or think that somebody will pay for it.
I'm like indifferent kind of on it. I see the positives to it. I also kind of despise just being a cheap little money grab for some people too. But obviously I talked about the nostalgia factor of, going to go see my favorite movie on the big screen again, or for the first time, I should say, on the big screen.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like they're taking spots away from new movies, really, either.
It's not like there's 10 blockbuster movies that are coming out, and they're going to have to push one aside to have this re-release. I think part of it is just like, you know what this probably is as a result of is like the writer's strike stuff of not having to make films and do all this other stuff. It's like, all right, here we can put some films that can make some money into the theater right now.
Fill the gap while we kind of try to get back into the production cycle of these different things. A reason for it.
I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but
and I mean it is just I would have to imagine an essentially cheaper option to just be like, hey, here's this movie we have that we know people like and probably will go see. Let's just put it out rather than, funding a new movie, blah, 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 and splitting revenue, blah, 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 and all this different stuff. And then you have to market that movie and get it to people. And it's like, here's Ghostbusters original. Go see it. If people are going to see it, they're going to go see it. And then, it's not like it cost you anything. You just pulled it out of old storage or whatever and put it out there. You're not marketing that. So it makes a lot of sense on that side of things as well. And, so it's going to continue to happen, I would assume, and it's just it's like the Bulls-Hawks matchup. It's great. You can ignore it if you don't like it, and if it's a movie you like Kings Warriors, then you can go see it and see it on the big screen. But I just think they should do more sports with this still. I think that's still like if I could go watch the play-in at the theater and have some fries or something.
I suppose we're just sort of talking about a sports bar, but in a movie theater. But
but I want the giant. Yeah, then it's like, what are you? Okay, you're just at like a Big Al's or something with a big screen.
I don't know. I think there's something to it to being with a certain group of people.
It's wild to me they
maybe
don't
you
even
bring a group of people with you to go watch the game at the theater. Like I think there is something to that. 100%.
Yes. Yeah, maybe it's. I don't know if the rules are different or if it's more rowdy or.
I'm basing this off of my experience. Was
how
like
that would
the
work.
lights were dimmed a little bit. They weren't like movie theater dark or whatever, but like you could
Yeah,
still chit
it's
chat
one
and
of
cheer for the
those.
game, and it's not like it was dead silent in a movie theater when you're trying to watch the game because that's not enjoyable. You want to be able to express yourself.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I was trying to wonder too if, like, would it bother like the adjacent theaters who are just watching movies?
This one was
like,
different.
People react to
there
movies.
was a second floor to the theater, and that was the only theater that was upstairs. So like,
Yeah, sure.
And so
yeah,
like
maybe
that
more separation.
Wasn't on top of or next to other theaters, so you didn't necessarily hear it. That's the only difference I would say. So like, I don't know, it could.
Right.
I feel like I have heard loud movies in the theaters next door when I've watched the movie before.
Yeah, and people react to movies. It feels like less and less nowadays, but certainly at the time and stuff. On your left, that gets a big reaction. But yeah, whatever it takes to keep them afloat, I guess.
Movie guys, so we want to see the theaters succeed and stay alive because there is something about going to a theater and seeing a movie that is just a different experience than watching it at home on your couch.
Sometimes just to support a theater, I'll just go to the movies and just like take a nap, just kind of hang out, buy some food, buy a ticket, take a nap, and then leave, and then go back the next day and watch the same movie for no particular reason. So that's just what I like to do to support theaters. Yeah, I'm just a patron of the arts, really. So,
anything else to add on to this episode, Ray?
I fell asleep seeing Monkey Man yesterday, and it's burning me. It's burning me up inside. That's a loud, kinetic movie. I don't know how you slept
through
like
a portion of that. You must have been really.
Man, I was just out, and then I did the annoying thing where you wake up, and you're like, "Oh, that was weird. I must have credits." It's like. So at least like someone didn't wander by and be like, "Hey, sir, you have to leave."
You are snoring too loud in the theater. Could you please relieve yourself?
Yeah. Hopefully they weren't annoyed. The movie was loud enough for them that they didn't hear me snoring. We'll see. But yeah, that's my shame.
So be it. Well, that wraps up this episode of Sportslandia as we're pushing up on 2 hours. I don't think anybody realized that we were going to be talking basketball for an hour plus today. You're welcome. But yeah, so that's Ray Bradley. I'm Brian Slyke. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Sportslandia, brought to you by the Next Professional Athlete platform. Ray, your sweatshirt's coming soon. It's right over here to my left. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode, but thanks for tuning in this one. We'll catch you next time.